Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing something a little bit different. We are going to talk about fasting, which is a practice of voluntarily refraining, partially or completely, from consuming calories. Different fasting methods exist, but we will explore the therapeutic prolonged water-only fast, which spans at least 2 days of consuming only water to promote health. Now, most of us can safely embark on a prolonged water-only fast for up to 40 days, given we have the adequate body fat, muscle, and decent general health. The survival of our bodies during this fast is supported by our ability to enter ketosis and use ketone bodies as alternative brain and organ energy sources. Evolutionary biologists theorize that our ancestors, the Homo sapiens, evolved having unreliable access to food resources, becoming even more unpredictable with the advent of agriculture. Historically, fasting has been practiced in almost every culture and religion for millenniums. The therapeutic fasting we know today has been making a comeback as a tool to counteract the degenerative diseases resulting from the overconsumption of highly processed foods. But that's enough background information. Let's talk about the physiology of fasting. Essentially, our bodies gradually transition from a fed state through a fasted state, and finally into starvation. This transformative process is regulated by various mechanisms which include metabolic, endocrine, and neuronal adaptations. These make sure our energy needs are continuously met and even seem to slow down aging processes. There are 5 fairly distinct metabolic process shifts, or rather 5 phases of fasting that we'll talk about today. Remember, these metabolic states often coexist, and the rates can vary between individuals. Age, sex, and nutrient reserves all influence how we respond to changes in metabolism during fasting. Notably, the metabolism in lean individuals differs considerably from that in obese individuals during fasting, with the lean individuals producing higher concentrations of ketone bodies and getting a higher percentage of energy from protein oxidation. In other words, if you are already quite lean, you will burn through more protein reserves for energy. Let's start with Metabolic Phase 1, which kicks off immediately after you've had a meal. At this point, foods are digested into sugars, amino acids, and fatty acids, which are absorbed into the blood, processed in the liver, and transported back to the blood to maintain physiological processes. When sugar levels in our blood rise, it stimulates the secretion of insulin, which regulates the uptake and use of glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids. At this point, most of your body is using glucose as the preferred source of energy, and any excess gets converted to triglycerides for storage and secretion when blood glucose is low. Next is Metabolic Phase 2, which begins around 4 to 6 hours after your final caloric intake. The decrease in blood glucose levels triggers the secretion of glucagon, a hormone that opposes insulin and stimulates the breakdown of stored liver glycogen into glucose. At this phase, about 75% of daily glucose requirements are met by the glucose from liver glycogen, and the remaining 25% from the process of gluconeogenesis. Now, let's talk about Metabolic Phase 3, which lasts from 24 to 48 hours after your last meal. During this phase, gluconeogenesis becomes the primary source of glucose. This process produces glucose from non-carbohydrate sources like glycerol, lactate, and amino acids. When glucose drops low, breakdown of enzymes, skeletal muscle, and other connective tissue provides amino acids for gluconeogenesis. At this stage, the glucose concentration in the blood begins to decline. However, it is still being utilized by all tissues except the liver. Let's move on to Metabolic Phase 4, which starts about 48 hours after your last caloric intake and lasts until approximately the 5th to the 7th day. During this phase, the kidneys become progressively important for maintaining blood glucose levels. Simultaneously, decreased glucose and increased glucagon levels stimulate increased breakdown of fat stores into fatty acids and glycerol. Your body starts to convert glycerol into glucose. In your liver, fats get broken down into a chemical called acetyl-CoA, but there's a limit to how much acetyl-CoA your liver can handle at any given time, and that limit is determined by how much of another chemical called oxaloacetate is available. When there's more acetyl-CoA than the liver can handle, it gets turned into things called ketone bodies. Now, the interesting thing is, your liver can't use these ketone bodies for energy, so it releases them into your bloodstream. The main types of ketone bodies that the liver produces and releases are acetoacetic acid and beta-hydroxybutyric acid. Towards the end of this metabolic phase, your brain starts to switch from using glucose for energy to mainly using these ketone bodies. So despite the fact you're not eating, your body finds different ways to produce the energy it needs to function. Lastly, let's discuss Metabolic Phase 5, which starts when ketogenesis exceeds gluconeogenesis and continues until starvation begins. This phase's length really depends on how much fat and muscle you have, how active you are, as well as overall health. The use of fat stores for energy needs reduces dependency on gluconeogenesis, which means we burn less protein for energy. After about 4 days, the brain will be using primarily ketones. The final or end phase of fasting is starvation, and that doesn't begin until essential proteins are catabolized to meet energy requirements. The average 155-pound human can fast for 2 to 3 months before starvation sets in. Please remember that prolonged water-only fasting should only be conducted under medical supervision, and you should talk to your doctor before attempting any fasting at all to ensure that you are safe. If you enjoyed the content or learned something new, hit the like button and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what other health topics you'd like to cover. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.